Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good night. So we are here presenting our webinar series. Today we're going to be listening from Jonny Reader, visiting from the UK. Today we are presenting from Cornell University. We're visiting Cornell and RPI for a series of introductions and just looking at the research. Jonny will be talking about his activities in vertical farming in the UK and how the market is reacting to Brexit and food production, how that's impacting all the CEA industry over there. My name is Erico Mattos. I've been hosting the other previous GLASE webinars. Just before we start, two quick messages. One is that this webinar is being recorded, so it will be available at our website afterwards. And also, if you have any questions, please use the chat box. We will answer the questions at the end of the presentation. So after John is ready, configuring the presentation, we will open the chat box and answer as many questions as we can, all the way to 12. So with that said, start the presentation. Thanks for your attendance. Johnny?
Cool, thank you very much for having me, Erico. It's really good to be here. Yeah, so did any of you guys watch the Wimbledon Cup final this year? No? Well, that's fine, I guess. You're watching the Cricket World Cup final, because I know you guys are very big on cricket. But if you did watch Wimbledon, you'll have seen it was a very exciting one. So we had Federer and Djokovic locked in a 4-hour and 57-minute final, the longest since Wimbledon began in 1877. And Djokovic just finally narrowly managed to scrape a win and claim his 5th crown at the championships. But let me tell you of a story about Wimbledon that built up as the games approached, which I'm sure you'll find a lot more interesting. So strawberries and cream. Strawberries and cream have been the staple snack of Wimbledon since it began in the Victorian era. It's said the two go together better than an Englishman and a cup of tea. In fact, they're enjoyed so much that an estimated 28 tons of strawberries and 7,000 litres of cream were consumed in the tournament this year. So in American, I think that's 60,000 pounds of strawberries and 2,000 gallons. So you can see it's a really enjoyed snack. But this year it received even more attention than usual. So the strawberries at Wimbledon have always used British strawberries, and they're picked on the morning of the event. Typically, this is done by Eastern European workers around 4 to 5 a.m. before they're transported, inspected just ahead of time. So you can see we take this a little bit too seriously. Here's someone bringing in the strawberries in the morning. But unfortunately, due to circumstances we're pretty fed up of talking about back at home, involving the words Britain and exit, there's a chance that these Eastern European workers may no longer be able to travel over freely during the summer months, which will drastically raise the price of strawberries. In fact, British Summer Fruits, which is the industry body accountable for 97% of berries supplied to UK supermarkets, has estimated it could be as much as 50%. BSF chairman Lawrence Ollins took it slightly further. She said, "This is as extreme as it gets." If we do not have pickers, we do not have a soft fruits industry. So it's pretty intense stuff, but for Wimbledon, this has caused them to look into getting strawberries from outside of the UK, which would be a true crime against the tradition of the sport, and I'm sure you'll agree, more intense than the championship final. But this isn't just going to affect strawberries, it's going to affect our entire food industry. So in 2017, 30% of the £113.2 billion industry came from the EU, which is a pretty sizable sum, especially when you consider the British Retail Consortium has estimated across the board prices will rise by about 22%. And this is still only telling half the story. So if we break this down further, £11.1 billion of fruit and veg was imported into the UK in 2017, which is the wide majority of our total food imports. If we break that down further, 76% of the vegetables and 41% of the fruit and nuts came from the EU. So we can really just start to see how reliant we are on the EU for keeping the nation stocked up on fibre and eating their 5 a day. And yeah, I mean, where else can we source 350,000 kilograms of tomatoes for our pizza toppings and pasta sauces? So how can we best tackle this issue? Well, I think I've solved the problem, and that is to just simply say, no thank you, Brexit, admit it's not working for us and call it a day. I've run this one past Boris Johnson, but apparently it's a no-go. So we're going to have to look to produce more of our food locally. But this comes with its own set of issues. So one, you can imagine space in the UK is already at a premium. And two, the nation has developed a taste for cuisines from hotter, and let's face it, less wet climates. So to give you an example, we enjoy squeezing Spanish lemons onto our traditional all British fish and chips. Just ignore the fact the cod is sourced from Iceland and the potatoes are sourced from France. We like to put North African cilantro cuttings on our chicken tikka masalas. Again, rice imported from India, peppers and chilies imported from Spain. But surprisingly, the chicken didn't have to cross the channel because we're the largest poultry producer in the EU. So if we're stuck for space and we're trying to cater to international tastes, what can we do? Well, the obvious thing would be to import our food from elsewhere, outside the EU, but this has raised concerns with regards to food safety standards. And also it doesn't alleviate the issue. We need to produce more food locally if we're going to alleviate its concerns around food security. So for those of you who read the presentation title, one of the methods that tick most of the boxes, and one that's starting to play a more prominent role in agriculture worldwide, is of course vertical farming. So vertical farming is really starting to grow in the UK, pun absolutely intended. It's mimicking the compound annual growth rate we're used to seeing elsewhere in the world, so around 25%. We have organisations such as UK Urban Agritech, so that's UK UAT, and they're bringing together the key players in the industry to push that industry forward. So one of the main drivers for those in the UK vertical farming scene, especially those that prove to be successful, is food branding. So to give you an example of that, Growing Underground is a business based in London, and their business is centred around the niche of growing in a network of tunnels underneath London. So these were originally used as World War II air raid shelters. And by centering in on this niche, they've developed their food brand and can now sell their products at a premium in supermarkets and online. And because of this success, they now do organised tours of their facilities, which is an increasing attraction for tourists and locals alike. Additionally, Ocado is an online UK supermarket, and they've invested £17 million into the Jones Food Company. And this money is going to be used to build the largest vertical farm in the UK, and it will churn out 420 tonnes of basil, parsley and coriander each year. And the USP of that is they're going to get that produce to consumers within an hour of being picked. So I don't know if you've seen these warehouses. They have these robots that run over the floor, pick up bits and place them in the correct boxes to be delivered. And this is the same company that's being contracted to build 20 of these warehouses for Kroger in the US, among other places in Europe. So to give you a better idea of the whole scene in the UK, here's the current members list for UK UAT. So there's a whole wide range of businesses, ranging from technology developers to vertical farms and system providers. Each company brings their own skills and specialities to the table with the aim of mobilizing the industry, tackling issues such as environmental and sustainability concerns, food security around Brexit, of course, and societal changes with regards to healthier living, you know, the hashtag vegan and all that sort of thing. And these issues are reflecting the national mindset. So from 2010 to 2017, UK was spending 5.4 billion on ethical food spending. 2017, that moved up to 11 billion. And from the year 2000 to 2017, they increased their green home spending tenfold. Although I'm pretty sure buying for reuse is down to people going to supermarkets, realizing they've forgotten their reusable shopping bags and then buying more reusable shopping bags, which is definitely a big problem. Consumers are also showing concern for where their food comes from. So this was shown by a 24.3% increase in Rainforest Alliance certified products sold. And if you've seen the recent fires in Brazil, that's really brought this back into the forefront with the media and is pushing that even further. So with all of this going on, it's pushed vertical farming to the forefront of the media, with its reduced food miles, reduced water consumption, reducing what we call the overall carbon footprint. So VFarm is the company I work for, and therefore, of course, the best in the UK. And we produce a wide range of systems from for chefs and barmen all the way to commercial growers. These systems ranging from the size of a kitchen restaurant fridge all the way to larger insulated rooms have gained a reputation for their quality, which has put them into unis, shops, labs all across Europe. We've even sold a system to someone who wanted one in their lounge. Now, the smallest system we produce turns out about 100 lettuces a month. So this guy must have been pretty keen on his salads. I don't know what he was doing with that. But on the larger scale, we believe that by splitting warehouses into smaller chambers and zones can reduce the risk for growers with regards to pests and diseases wiping out their crop. And it also allows them to have a more diverse range of crops. So you can imagine lots of individual environments tailored to individual crops, which is really helpful when developing a food brand. So that's shameless plug over, but as I'm sure you're all wondering, we do deliver to the US, so you don't have to worry there. So the real great thing about vertical farming is it's not just affecting the agricultural market in the UK. Instead, it's tackling a whole wide range of sectors, and all for different reasons. So there's a lot of government interest, especially as things like Brexit and environmental concerns increase. So there's a lot of funding available, and that's why the majority of vertical farming projects in the UK are partially government grant funded. Charitable organisations, so where VFarm is based in the UK is right next to a food bank, and currently they can't store fresh produce like salads and herbs because of the short shelf life. But if they were to have a vertical farm on site, this would alleviate that issue, so it can just be picked when it's needed, which is really good because it means the food can get to those in need of it, which I think would be a great thing. In the food and beverage industry, vertical farms aren't only playing a role in providing high quality and fresh produce to institutions, but they're also bringing in the element of food theatre. So this is where you would see chefs and barmen taking cuttings of herbs, putting it into their cocktails or food, similar to how lobster tanks have been used in restaurants for years. And this is really good for ROIs. So people who have these systems in their restaurants, they see people coming into their stores, taking photos, putting on Instagram, once again, hashtag plants or whatever, which raises awareness, and yeah, it brings in money into that establishment. As I'm sure you're aware, vertical farming is prominent in universities around the world. So in the UK, we have the University of Nottingham, hosts one of VFarm's research facilities. And here we're testing new filtration methods, which may make its way into future vertical farms. So again, we're also seeing interest from places we perhaps didn't initially expect. So we've sold systems to new builds in London, such as design hubs and apartment buildings. And systems here have not only been seen to provide fresh produce for people living there, but it also fosters social interaction. So bringing those people into one room, bringing the community together, and in the case of businesses, invoking discussion across departments. So it's really great to see the effect that that's having in the UK. So where is vertical farming going in the UK? Well, I'd like to start with this quote from Steve Jobs. And he said, "I think the biggest innovations of the 21st century will be at the intersection of biology and technology. A new era is beginning." So are we in that new era? Well, I think we can certainly be sure that vertical farming is going to play a more prominent role in our agriculture. Of course, conventional agriculture will always have its place, especially with root crops and larger fruits, this sort of thing. But in the UK, where space is at a premium and the climate may not always lend itself to crops, it's going to play a large role in our leafy green salad and herb production. And this range is already starting to expand as tech develops and costs fall. We're also going to see, as we're seeing already, vertical farms in establishments, as I said, with restaurants, shops, these kind of venues, not only as a way of providing fresh produce for those individuals, but as a way of reconnecting them with their food. So I'm sure you've seen people are very disconnected with their food nowadays. So it's great to see where it comes from, and also bringing that element of food theatre as well into those establishments. So I think there's a really great opportunity here to tackle some of the major issues surrounding conventional farming. So whether that's high land use and therefore tackling deforestation, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, so using renewables. We were talking yesterday about solar farms, may not be viable because of the amount you would need for a vertical farm, but certainly in places like Wales, where there's a lot of hydroelectric energy available, it can really start to make sense. We also want to reduce our food waste, so whether that's by reducing the food miles, so how far our produce travels, or just reducing the loss of harvest due to diseases, pests, and droughts. We also want to reduce our water consumption, and on top of that, by not using pesticides and fertilizers, we can reduce the amount of toxic water. So yeah, these are great things to tackle, and I think it's important that we bring our research together to accelerate the advent of vertical farming to a point where it is viable for a wider range of crops and at a price point that is used to the conventional prices we're seeing today. It's really great to see institutions such as GLASE bringing together key members in the States and elsewhere to try and tackle these issues and make these goals more feasible. And I hope and I believe that by bringing our research together from universities, farms and labs in the UK to great institutions such as Cornell and RPI and the members of GLASE, we can push the industry forward, keeping Wimbledon strawberries British, and more importantly, I'm sure you'll agree, make farming great again. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks, Jonny. Great presentation. We'll get the questions. I see we got a few questions along the way. So I start with those questions, and then if we have questions, we can go as well. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining the webinar. Let's see what we have here. Okay. Starting here. All right, presentation. Jonny, do you do turnkey projects in the farm?
Yes, we do. We do bespoke rooms. So if you have a particular area or size, or you're looking to produce a certain amount of crop, we can bespoke make systems with HVACs, rooms, and racks. So yeah, we do turnkey projects.
Okay. Next question. What do you think of vertical farming replacing open field supply? Any cannibalization between the two? Is it a realistic scenario, or these are different playgrounds? What are the pros and cons of this shift in your point of view?
I think, as I said, it's more a supplemental thing. I really can't see vertical farming replacing just conventional agriculture, but certainly we can produce, high quality crops near to where produce is going to be consumed. So it will play a bigger role in our agriculture, but it won't be replacing open field because if you've got the sun and the water there, it's always going to be cheaper at the end of the day.
Sure. Next one. Do you think indoor farming needs tailored genetics?
I think that's a really interesting question. So there's a lot of issues around GMOs, and people kind of shy away from them. And that's, if you're doing it in an open field environment, there's a chance for those GMO seeds to spread and cause damage. But I think vertical farming can provide a stable platform and controlled platform to experiment with GMOs, because you haven't got a chance of those seeds spreading out into the open. So I think we can start tailoring GMOs to benefit more from hydroponics and vertical farm environments. Yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity there, and it's something that needs to be looked into.
What do British people think about GMOs versus European Union?
It's not really too much of a hot topic. People don't really talk about it too much. I think people, so long as it's being analysed properly and it's being proved to be food safe, people are generally happy. I I mean, GMOs, you know, you can get increased yields and everything. So with a growing population, I think people understand that it can be a good thing, but we just need to be careful about how we go about it.
Yeah, most recently, there's a lot of talks and conversations about should we breed species to adapt for controlling environmental agriculture that do well, right? We are getting crops that have been evolving under the field for years and years and now bringing to the indoor places. So should we be breeding species for that, or do we just continue to tailor the environment to adapt to what we have today? This conversation has been a big topic at a recent conference, and it's coming over and over and over. So do you see any, with the breeding as well,
I think a combination of the two. I think obviously you can make the environment more efficient, so you can start to have more bespoke control, bring in these sensors, tailor the environment specifically to crops. But once you've nailed that down, you can start to produce crops that will benefit from that more. So like we were talking about lettuce having tip burn if it grows too quickly, you can start to hopefully modify those crops so that they don't suffer from that. So I think a combination of the two, and with time, as we've been doing in fields for thousands of years, we'll have crops that are better suited to those environments.
There's a lot of conversation right now about speed breeding, and I think it's a get around for the GMO question. We grow thousands and thousands of little plants, and we can automate the phenotypic recognition. So the improved plants, we can take those and utilize them. And although it may not be quite as efficient as a GMO approach, it gets us around the issue.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting to see.
To expand the topic here, we got two questions related to costs now. So let's start, I think, with what is the electricity range rate in UK? What is the price? Maybe dollars per kilowatt hour. Do you?
I can try
per kilowatt hour.
Yeah. So in households, I think we typically pay around 15 pence per kilowatt hour, and then in industry it might be between like 9 and 11 pence. It's going to be, that's for where we're based, so that's Coventry. Elsewhere it might be slightly different.
And that leads to the next question then, going around cost, which is, in your view, with your experience in UK, are enough consumers willing to pay an additional cost for local indoor grown produce to overcome the higher costs to produce the produce compared to traditional methods?
Yeah,
Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I gave you that example of growing on the ground, and they sell their products at a premium because they're not using pesticides and fertilizers, and it's very local. So people like the story behind it. So I think consumers certainly are willing to pay an additional cost, but it depends what bracket you're in terms of what your income is. Obviously, at the end of the day, if you're struggling to pay for food, then people won't pay that additional cost.
Sure.
I guess that question has the inherent assumption that the produce produced locally indoor is more expensive than otherwise produced produce.
Yeah.
Would you think that that assumption is accurate for the UK?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, we tend to import a lot of our fruit and veg from Spain, especially, and that just seems to work out cheaper. But people are becoming more aware now of buying food locally. But in supermarkets, you don't really pay attention to where that comes from. It's more when you go to the market and you see locally grown produce, and it's slightly more expensive, but tends to be better quality, so people are happy to pay.
Yeah, I had a question related to that. So in UK, on your case with beef farms specifically, you see a better market opportunity just because you can increase yield over time, have a consistent crop production, or these nutritional aspects, the quality factor would play a big role for your consumers?
I think at the moment it's more of a niche, so added value because of the high nutrition content, the flavour, the fact is there's no pesticides and fertilizers. But obviously the issue we're trying to tackle is feeding a growing population. Like that's the main goal. So hopefully in the future, as the prices decrease and we use more renewables, then it's a case of bigger yields and providing mass food for everyone.
Sure. One more question. So we get now into the pest management area. So hi, John, thanks for your presentation. One more cost-related question. Can you talk a little bit about the proportion of your costs dedicated to insect and pest management systems? So do you have any insect and pest management system installed with your production facilities, and what would be the costs associated with that?
So we sell racks on our own, in which case there isn't really anything for controlling pests and diseases, other than filters for the water. But on the bespoke rooms where it's an insulated room, the HVAC has filters. Typically you'd have a two-door system. So, you go through the first door, clean yourself down before heading into the environment. And then after that, it's more down to the growers. So we're talking again about tackling aphids, so bringing in parasitic wasps, that kind of thing. But that's about it with regards to pests and disease.
One more follow-up question here. Okay. So Jonny, what is the cost of production in your system? Price per kilogram or pounds per kilogram?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. So we sell the systems, in which case there's a price for that system, or we'll estimate for a bespoke room. You can see a lot of that on our website. And then after that, I think that's more about the grower, how they would sell their crop. Is that right?
Sure.
So yeah, we're just more involved in selling the systems themselves, so we don't look into so much the cost of the production itself.
Sure. One more question coming up. May AI be integrated into the growing model, having human-less systems? So what is the role of, we didn't talk about this, that's a good question. What is the role of automation? Have you seen lots of automation with the systems in UK, and do you think we can go to a human-less production system at some point?
Yeah, really interesting question. So at the moment in the UK, the majority of companies that are successful focus on the crop. So there's already high capital expenditure, so you want to reduce that. So there's not a huge amount of automation, and that keeps the costs down. In the future, when, as I was talking about, providing mass food for the masses, then automation, we do start to need to bring that in. But at the moment, it's really expensive, and with your capital expenditure already so high, you don't want to bring in too much too quickly, because then one harvest lost could be the end of your business. So it's something that's coming, but at the moment it's not prominent.
Sure. One question that I had is regarding policies and regulations. Mm-hmm. So here in the US, we've seen over the past 2-3 years, more policies, more regulations, both on, especially the manufacturers, the systems. Mm-hmm. So we are focusing on lighting and engineering systems. So a lot of regulations to standardize the lighting fixtures, so we can help growers to understand what they're looking for, how to better choose the equipment. So there are being pushes from different institutions, and also there are several programs by the federal government and state level agencies to help growers to acquire energy rebates, energy efficient programs, financial programs, to acquire energy efficient technologies, making their systems more efficient, use less energy, and becomes more profitable. What is the scenario in UK or in Europe in general, if you know about the Europe, but what is in UK? Is there any regulations, standards? How is that working right now?
It's still a fairly new market, but we are, similar to how I imagine it is here, we're starting to see more regulations come into play. There's a lot of talk about trying to get organic or similar kind of certification, but it's quite difficult because people think if there's no soil involved, it can't be organic. But we're trying to push the fact that we're not using pesticides and fertilizers. So I know places like Australia, and this is something we may bring in ourselves, they actually label their products as hydroponic grown, which people are happy to pay a premium for over there. So we might start to see something similar like that coming in. With regards to the systems themselves, everything has to, of course, be CE certified. If companies in the US start bringing in these certifications for lighting and things like that, it tends to come over because it's already in place. So we're starting to see more and more, but it's still early days.
Do you think the average UK consumer knows what the word hydroponic means?
It's a good question. Certainly, if you say vertical farming to someone, they say, "God, what's that?" Hydroponics, I think people are more aware because it's more into like greenhouses. But as I said, people are very disconnected with food. So a lot of people here know they don't know what that is.
And Maya, you've been studying that in New York City, right?
Right,
Is that one of
that's
the
a-
questions?
yeah.
What did people know what hydroponic meant?
No, people like in general had heard the term before, and so like we would ask them to be like, oh, well, what do you think it means? And like something related to water, and like they didn't really have a tight definition. And that word they kind of knew, but then if you presented them with the words like aquaponic or aeroponic, they're just like related to water or related to air, like that's all they could really know. So yeah.
Probably pretty similar, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're making associations more with the roots of the words itself than the meaning.
Exactly. 100%.
Officially their heads.
Yeah.
All right, so two more questions here. Jonny, are there equivalent financing options for your systems? So if someone wants to buy your systems, is there financing options?
I don't really look into the sales side so much, but if you go onto our website, so that's bfarm.co.uk, you can get in contact with our sales manager, and I'm sure there are options and things like that available. So yes, you can find out on our website.
Another question is, are you aware of the DLC horticultural lighting program? If so, what are your thoughts? So the DLC, it's a consortium here in the US, it stands for Design Lights Consortium, and it's a group that is now playing a big role into the regulation of lighting fixtures. So they are more into the manufacturing side.
Yeah.
They're looking for the lighting system itself. They're not looking for anything else, but it's related for horticulture, right? And the DLC is trying to come up with regulations and standards in which they're pushing for a comparison of apples to apples. I think bottom line is that. If you're going to look for a lighting system today, manufacturers can give you different information. They can weigh more than one aspect than another one. So you're going to get one set of information from one manufacturer, another one from the manufacturer. So how growers can compare them? Now the DLC is coming up with a set of regulations that you have to certify your fixture. So first of all, one is the standards. You can make a fair comparison if you have the same criteria being analyzed from different manufacturers. And the other big role they're playing is that as a manufacturer, lighting manufacturer, you have to achieve certain standards. There's a baseline that your light needs to qualify related to energy efficiency.
Okay.
So you have to pass a certain bar, so then you get certified by the DOC, and then as a manufacturer, you're able to get rebates from energy utility companies. So you have the standards and the rebates. So trying to separate an efficient lighting system versus a not so efficient lighting system. So if you're not familiar with the DLC, that's what the DLC is. What are your thoughts about that? Have you seen anything like that in UK? And do you think that the show can help your customers, I guess?
Yeah, that's a new one on me, but I think any kind of standardization would be useful, because right now when people come to buy lights, some manufacturer might give it in lux and you want micromoles or vice versa, and there's a lot of confusion out there. I think the LED horticultural market, whilst it is rapidly expanding, it's still fairly new to people. So I think trying to standardize it early on is definitely a good thing that we can benefit from. So yeah, that would be my thoughts.
We haven't seen any question about labor, I guess. You mentioned you started our presentation talking about, right, that you have a certain percentage labor coming from other places of Europe or UK.
Yeah.
Labor is a big challenge here as well in US. We also have the seasonal workers come to work in greenhouse in many cases. And we see two main challenges here. One is the lack of labor, so just lack of people to work, and then lack of qualified labor as well. So especially now with horticulture, technologies are evolving, automation, you need a different set of skills from farmers today than you had a few years ago.
Yeah.
And that's evolving really fast. Even institutions, education institutions are trying to catch up on that, but even education institutions, sometimes we don't know what's happening in the field and how to cope with that. So Maya is here, she's been working on one project like this, trying to understand and identify the needs. So what are your thoughts regarding to labor? And I think it might tie to the automation question before, how much of this is a challenge for you? Is that possible to quantify this problem in UK? And what are your thoughts? Where do you think the UK market is going regarding to labor and automation?
I think as with everything with Brexit right now, we don't exactly know what's going to happen. But certainly a lot of the seasonal picking is done by people from Europe. And this is typically jobs people in the UK don't want to do. So as soon as we lose that labour, it's bad for the European workers because they rely on that. It's also bad for us because it's going to raise the price of our berries and everything else. More specifically for vertical farming, as I said, at the moment, automation isn't a huge thing, but we can still reduce labour anyway. So when it comes to maintenance and cleaning, that's a big factor in any of these systems. So trying to optimise that so it's as easy to clean as possible. So to give an example, our NFT systems, so that's the systems with the gullies, typically take quite a long time to clean. So we've now changed that to a system that does both flood and drain and NFT using one tray. So the idea is, you can just take out one tray as opposed to 5 gullies, clean that, or put it through some kind of dishwasher or similar and put it back in. So there's many ways you can decrease labour time before you have to bring in automation.
With the type of work that people maybe in the UK may be more interested in doing rather than bending over in the soil.
Yeah.
There was a question that actually was texted to me from one of the attendees that couldn't get the chat to work. They said, what do you think are the most critical design elements for vertical farms compared to traditional greenhouses?
So a comparison between?
Yeah, so in terms of design elements, what would be critical in a vertical farm that might be different than a greenhouse?
I'm not too familiar with greenhouses, but with vertical farms, I think there's a lot more emphasis on sort of environmental control, so with temperature and humidity, because you're completely controlling that, whereas greenhouses, you bring in the factor of the sun, and that's going to affect things, or the air outside. So they're quite different in that respect. You have a lot more control with a vertical farm, so you control everything from the light intensity, you keep that constant, and yeah, things, as I said, temperature, humidity, and so forth. So.
You were talking about, when you answered the labor question, cleaning your systems. How about food safety?
Yeah.
Are there regulations in UK for indoor farms, for greenhouses, and challenges in this area?
At the moment, it's not specific to vertical farms, it's just general food safety standards. So you can't use any chemicals that would be harmful to human health that might come into contact with the crops. So in between harvest, we try to use cleaning products that are, I don't want to use the term organic, but just not harmful. So yeah, and with materials you use, you have to use certain plastics that are food safe. Again, when it comes to frames and things like that, you have to use certain materials. So as long as you're following the food safety standards that are already in place, then it's fine.
One more question for the audience regarding just human safety. So for workers spending 8 hours a day in indoor farms, there is a risk of eye damage and potentially other non-visual effects to the workers due to the light tone for plants and not people. Do you have any systems to address this issue?
Yeah, we were talking quite a bit about this. So you might see in a lot of vertical farms, they use lights that look purple. And people working in those environments, they can develop eye strain and they come out of the room and they can just see yellow. So we use full spectrum LEDs, so it's a white light. It's a much nicer working environment for people in there, and they don't really suffer from these issues. With regards to how long people spend in those environments, I mean, once you've planted everything and put it in place, there's actually very little human interaction. So it's only really during the harvest period and propagating and seeding that people are in the environment for a prolonged period of time. So especially with the white lights, it's not a major issue at all.
Mike?
I just had a quick question about the strawberry example at the beginning. Really
Sure.
cool example, by the way. Most of the strawberries, are they grown in greenhouses?
Yeah, at the moment, the most UK strawberries are all polytunnels. And it's a very short season for UK strawberries, which is why it's such a big snack for Wimbledon, because it just happened to coincide. And there's a lot of talk with supermarkets trying to extend that season. And one of the ways that could happen is with vertical farming. So that's something we're looking into a lot.
And Neil, any other questions?
Right. Within, you talked about leafy greens and herbs being some of the early crops for early adoption in vertical farms. Do you know if there's leafy greens or herbs that are more common in the UK versus the US?
No, I think it's pretty similar. We also see a lot of microgreens, which are pretty common here as well. It's generally high value crops, so people like growing microgreens like red amaranth and various other ones like that, just because they get a faster return. But interestingly, as I was saying about having systems in restaurants, people find in those establishments the return mostly comes from footfall, so people coming in to see the systems, as opposed to the actual crop itself giving a return.
Right.
So that's really interesting. So there's one example is a vegan restaurant in Bristol, and they have one of our systems, and he reckons the payback was about 2 months, just people like posting on Instagram and this kind of thing. So yeah, it's really interesting to see, and we didn't necessarily expect it.
Do you think there'll be other like low-hanging fruit, like or like what would be the next beyond leafy greens and herbs? Like where are we going to go next with vertical farming?
Certainly, berries are diversification crops. So strawberries. We're looking into lots of different herbs, and we're trying to refine varieties that lend themselves well to hydroponics, because some don't. Like with lettuces, some get a lot of tip burn, others don't. But at the moment, that's really it. We're not doing anything with root crops, just because anything that has a long cycle time just isn't really viable, especially on a larger scale.
And do you see opportunities in US? Are you looking for opportunities in US, partnerships to bring to UK? As far as business development, do you have anything in mind?
I don't know what the exact plan is, but I'm sure we do eventually want to work with companies in the US to try and just push the whole industry forward, especially with the smaller scale systems, the ones to go into restaurants and shops. It's much easier to scale up that. With regards to larger commercial grows, I don't think we'd look to do that here, because there's already places doing it very well. So yeah, for the moment, it's something we're looking into, but it's not at the forefront of the agenda at the moment.
Excellent. One more question. Sorry, Ed, go ahead.
Do you have obesity issues, and do you look at them as a marketing opportunity, to have low calorie but higher nutrition offerings?
Yeah, it certainly is a similar, we have an issue with obesity in the UK, and people are becoming more health conscious. So to take the example of microgreens again, they offer a lot of vitamin content, and your body retains it better than taking a tablet. So that's a really interesting space, and people kind of get excited by products like that. You're seeing a lot more smoothie companies starting up, so you've got innocent smoothie, this kind of thing. And people are getting a lot more health conscious. But again, it does come down to cost, and those products need to be comparable to less healthy alternatives for it to be a real success.
So 2 more questions, one technical and one business related or market related. Sorry, the market related. In the US, a large market driver for indoor farms is marijuana legalization. Do you expect the US will outpace the UK in this industry through this head start? So can you tell a little bit about the cannabis and hemp market in the UK?
Yes, currently CBD has just recently been legalized, but I don't think any industries it's not being majorly grown, so it's still quite difficult to get a license. It is something that I think in the next decade or so will definitely play more of a larger part in indoor agriculture, but it's not on the scale like we're seeing in the US. So I don't know how those markets are going to compete, or if they are competing, but obviously if it's legalized sooner, then it gives you a head start to start developing the tech and the protocols. So yeah, potentially, yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. Do you guys have any idea? So even to go across state borders is a big deal here. Can you go from one country to another? I don't think you would, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not legally.
Right. Yeah.
So the technical question: do you also offer agronomical support, or you just sell the hardware? So do you have software to control lights, pH, and all the other systems, or you have to buy them separate? So I think this question can be broken down to 2 parts. You sell the control systems, and do you offer support for your clients as well?
So yeah, we sell the hardware and we also offer support. So that's the initial setup and talking you through how to use the systems. We are developing our own control software, specifically for the fridge project we're working on. That's going to be app-based. So the idea is, you just buy seeded, the seeds, and then you select what you're going to grow, and everything's taken care of. Everything's automatically dosed. On our larger rooms, currently we use auto-grow systems, so they're not ours, but it is something we're developing at the moment. So we will start to do more software.
And related to that, there's a lot of conversations here in the US as well, how to do data standardization for data collection and data analysis. There are several companies doing what you're doing around here as well. Universities, they do a lot of control environmental agriculture test protocols, but we are not always are documenting and saving the data the way we can compare later on.
Yeah.
We could get great value of the data if we're collecting the data in a certain standard, creating meta files and having a database where you can concentrate the data. So 2 questions again. One, with the company, are you tracking all this data? Is this data available? And then in UK, are you aware of any database that we can collect data and analyze following certain protocols, certain standards for controlling environmental agriculture?
With it being the industry it is, there's a lot of IP with vertical farming. So we do run our own trials and we log that data, but it's kept internally. We're talking about one of the ways to get around that is to share that information, but in an anonymous sense. So that can be quite a good way of correlating research. So I think it is important to do that, especially if you're trying to tackle a larger problem and you need to bring people together to do that. But the majority of research is happening in universities, in which case you get publicized documents.
Well, one more question over here, which is how large is the farm team and what kind of expertise is your team comprised of? After you sell a unit, how much maintenance and technical support does the farm generally provide? So you kind of answer half of that.
So to give you a bit more background, VFarm is a subsidiary of a company called Hydrogarden, and they've been around for 26 years. They're the largest hydroponic wholesaler in the UK. So VFarm has come off of that. We still share the same staff. For the VFarm team specifically, there's about 10 people. Hydrogarden's a team of 100. And so we have a wide range of expertise, so from sales to design engineering to chemists and biologists. So after we sell a unit, there's a lot of support from the engineering team and the biologists who develop the protocols for how to use the systems. So even though VFarm itself is small, there's still the whole team of Hydrogarden to give that support with our systems.
Well, we're getting close to our time here, so just before I go to any other questions, I just would like to thank everybody here at Cornell for hosting the webinar, Jonny Reader for giving the talk, and also special thanks to Cherry Kubota at The Ohio State University, and let everybody knows here in this call that Cherry hosts the Indoor Ag Science Cafe. My apologies, I don't have the link here with me, but I can follow up an email for everyone that registered. I'll send this information. If you enjoyed this talk, you most likely will enjoy this series of talks as well. And our next webinar for GLASE, it's on September 26th. It'll be about dehumidification systems for greenhouse and indoor farms. I hope you can enjoy that as well. You join us for this next webinar and you'll enjoy the presentation. We do have a few more minutes. If anyone has any other questions, please submit through the chat box. Otherwise, as I mentioned at the beginning, this video will be recorded and available at our website, the GLASE website, where you can see all the other previous webinars. And you can always follow up by email with me if you need an introduction to Jonny, would like to know more about, please get in touch with me, and I will follow up with that and Jonny. Jonny, anything else you would like to say before we complete the presentation today?
Yeah, sure. So if you want to get in contact, I'll share my email address and people can contact me that way. If not, you can go to VFarm's website and learn more there. And other than that, thank you very much for having me here, and it's been a lot of fun. So thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for attending, and I hope we just see next week on our next webinar. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.